So people often ask me why I joined the NDP. Here's my story. I was born and raised on Vancouver Island. My great-grandparents met in Cumberland, and they got married there in the early 1920s. Later they went to Ocean Falls, a forestry mill town up on the Central Coast where my mom was raised, and they stayed there until the downturn in the forest sector up there, and the mill was on its way down, and they moved back to Vancouver Island. I have relatives stretching from Prince Rupert to Gibson's Landing to Vancouver Island that carry on our coastal way of life and our coastal values and heritage. My mom, she went to Qualicum Beach where she went to school, and later to Parksville and Courtenay-Alberni and Victoria. I was born and raised in Victoria. My mom was a single mother. Me and my brother were with my mom, and my mom was struggling to make ends meet. I remember empty cupboards and my mom often crying. We were at church on Thanksgiving, 1974, and I remember clear as a bell when Leif Wergeland and his wife Darlene and their family gave us a beautiful basket of fruit and vegetables at Thanksgiving at a time when we were desperate. We didn't know what we were going to do next. And it just gave us that light that we needed to know that we counted, that somebody cared. I was really lucky when my mom met my dad, who raised me. My dad came from a very difficult upbringing. They struggled as well to make ends meet. He's Cree, so faced a lot of racism and challenges through his life. He later learned how to build transmissions on his own and got a job as a transmission mechanic at 17 years old. And he's worked as a transmission mechanic for the last 50 years. And my family always worked hard. Real blue-collar family. My parents lived eventually in a co-op housing project where they were the higher earners of the lower middle class, helping support those that really were struggling at the bottom. And that co-op worked. It was a federal government project that the government built in the 1980s that worked for people, gave them safe, secure, and affordable housing. My parents were able to save money. And my mom and dad, they bought their first house when my mom was 51 and my dad was 48 years old. This is the kind of projects that get people started. And it's those kinds of projects that helped a lot of people in the 1970s, 1980s. But it's those kinds of projects that vanished under the Liberal government in the 1990s when they divested themselves from the National Housing Strategy, and those kinds of projects that were completely absent under the Harper Conservatives. But it's those kinds of projects that the NDP has put as a priority so that we can look after people when they need a lift up. And I think about the NDP. I think about our values to ensure that people have safe, secure, and affordable housing, that people aren't having to make a choice between rent and putting food on the table and buying medicine, or making sure they have adequate, affordable, safe childcare for their children so they can get back into the workforce and help support their families. We need to make sure that people have safe, secure, and affordable housing, just like my parents did when they lived in a co-op in the 1980s and 1990s.